Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, football season somehow never ends. We think, okay, like finally there's nothing time off, like a nice, reliable, relaxing. Nope, Tony, we have breaking news. Significant, major breaking news.
Significant major breaking news. Matt Patricia is your new Ohio State defense coordinator. This has been confirmed by Ohio State. Tim Walton is your co-defensive coordinator, and Matt Guerrieri, safeties coach, is your passing game coordinator. So the defensive staff is now set. Matt Patricia replaces Jim Knowles. And Tom, do you know the last time Matt Patricia was a college football coach? And I don't know if he's helped out anywhere this year, this past season, because I don't believe he was anywhere. But the last time he was patrolling the sidelines.
I'm going to say 2003.
That is correct, Tom. As a graduate assistant, though I say patrolling the sidelines, he may have been patrolling the eye in the sky. Or patrolling the coffee machine, something of that nature. Patrolling the copy machine and fax machine as well as a graduate assistant at, as Tom would say, Syracuse. So now then he spent a whole bunch of time in New England, as everybody knows, was a defensive coordinator for 2 Super Bowl champions, was a linebackers coach before then and won another Super Bowl. Then, of course, went off to Detroit. And I can't remember if he won any Super Bowls there. His time only lasted about 2.5 seasons, so I don't know.
I think he was not anywhere below the historical standard. I would say he at least met the historical standard in terms of number of Super Bowls won per 2.5-year stint in Detroit. So that's something.
And so then that lasted 2.5 years or so in Detroit. Then he went back to New England as an advisor for a couple of years, then was a defensive assistant with the Eagles in 2023. And then I'll say maybe just recharging this year or prepping for the college game. Who knows? But now noted New England Patriots fan Ryan Day has hired the former defensive coordinator of the New England Patriots. And I'll admit the first time his name came up, it's like, I don't know, like what about him makes you convinced that he will be able to recruit and do all of these things? And these are all the same questions, Tom, that I had about Jeff Hafley when Ryan Day brought him with him from the 49ers or so. But again, I'm still confused as to how this is going to work with Matt Patricia being more of an odd front guy and the unwillingness necessarily to move away from a 4-man front at Ohio State. But Tom, is that with the defensive line that they've lost now, is this something that you're going to be more willing to do, or how do you see this whole thing?
This is such a not the thing you're supposed to say when you're supposed to have like hot take, instant reaction. Like my instant reaction to this is, I don't know. Let's see. I see folks on our boards. I see folks in the comments here who have this like immediate visceral negative reaction. And we have people who we've had like immediate, like, this is going to be amazing. And I think my immediate question for everyone on both sides of that divide is based on what? Like, he won't be able to recruit. Based on what? He will be able to recruit. Based on what? He's going to kill the culture at Ohio State. Based on what? He's going to improve the culture at Ohio State. Based on what? Like, he has not coached in college in 20-something years. He hasn't been a full-time defensive coordinator since before he was a head coach. He was a head coach of the Lions during the Lions have functionally been broken as an organization for like 50 years at that point. So like, based on what? And it is the least sexy possible answer, but like, I think everyone should take a deep breath and take one step back from the ledge and just like, I don't know, let's see, let's give the guy who was the head coach of Ohio State the benefit of the doubt, who won a national championship, 3 weeks ago now. Like, I think maybe it's, this to me, look at someone who is a lifelong NFL guy who was not coaching in the NFL last year. This has some Chip Kelly vibes to me, where Chip Kelly last year was hoping to get back to the NFL, didn't get back to the NFL, and then came to Ohio State for 1 year. Like, this has some, I think my strongest opinion is I don't think Matt Patricia is going to be the defensive coordinator at Ohio State in 5 years. That's like my strongest take on all of this. It's either going to work, and then he probably gets back to the NFL in a year or two, or it's not going to work, and then he's not at Ohio State in a couple of years. But beyond that, yeah, sure. I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll see. The biggest piece of this is Tim Walton is still on staff. Matt Guerrieri is still on staff. You have kept those guys. Those guys are probably both getting nice new titles and probably a nice little salary bump after a very, very good 2024 season and some very effective recruiting and very, very effective development. That to me is the most important piece of this, which is keeping those guys on staff. And then, you kind of hit on it there. The common thread with a lot of the guys that we had sort of heard about or names that had been bandied about in terms of defensive coordinators was lots of guys who had experience sort of in the front seven kind of portion of the defense. And Matt Patricia is certainly in that bucket as well. So you've got a defensive front guy and your other two, your co-DC and your passing game coordinator, those are both secondary guys. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and I know people have some strong feelings on Matt Patricia, and some people have based those feelings on former players and maybe their dislike of Matt Patricia and what they came out and said. I haven't read all of the quotes, and I haven't read, frankly, any of them because New England and Detroit and the NFL, frankly, aren't necessarily on my radar, although apparently they need to be more based on recent hires. But yeah, I understand that when players come out and talk poorly about a coach, that's gonna leave a mark. But we'll see how things go moving forward. The one thing I can tell you is Ryan Day is not bringing in somebody to screw things up, and he's bringing in somebody with that's the number one thing is, will you not screw this up? Number two is, can you coach? That sort of thing. That's the level of concern with the culture. When you have it where it is, you're not going to bring in somebody that is just going to ruin things. And so I think people can maybe come down off the ledge on that portion of it, regardless of how the defense does. I think the culture will survive, whether this is an outstanding defense or a terrible defense. The foundation is there. So I think you can kind of relax on that one. Now, is this a good hire? This is a bad hire? I think nobody is better equipped to know this than Ryan Day. And he's talked. All of the questions that people have about Matt Patricia in terms of, what do you want to do stylistically? How are you in a living room recruiting? These are things that Ryan Day has a better idea of than anybody else. And so there's some of that as well, where you give the benefit of the doubt to the head coach, and no head coach is 100% on hires. We know that. And there are plenty of hires where you're like, oh, this is terrible. It turned out just fine. So I don't, like you, Tom, we're not into hot takes. I don't know how this is going to go because I don't know how this is going to go. So I'm not going to pretend like I do. I assume it'll be fine because there's plenty of good coaches and plenty of good players. Do you think it would be, absolute chaos? We don't really have proof of that. And if you want to point me at Kerry Combs, I can point you at a secondary that had no business starting at Ohio State. And really much of that entire defense had no business starting at Ohio State, and they would not start at Ohio State right now. So yeah, I understand there's some recent concerns about past defensive coordinators and hires and things of that nature. But yeah, I'm willing, Tom, to let this play out.
Right. I think, and I mean, the comments right now are full of people telling you definitively, 100%, this is going to be a disaster. I saw someone say that if Ohio State was going to go 12-0 before, now they're going to go no better than 8-4. Did you miss your meds today? I mean, I can't remember the last time a defensive coordinator lost a team 4 games that. I'm struggling to come up with any case in football. And again, I'm going to ask the question earlier, based on what? Is schematically what he does absolutely not a fit with Ohio State? I've seen a lot of people talking about players hating him in Detroit. That was as a head coach. That's a different thing. And we have already litigated this whole thing. And I've mostly sat this out on our board and let members sort of hash this out between themselves. there were a bunch of those people who then later sort of drew those comments back a little bit and were not nearly as harsh in retrospect. And as folks pointed out on board there, that's a head coaching position. That's a different thing than a defensive coordinator position. So, and also that was 5 years ago now. So people are allowed to learn and improve and grow as human beings. So even if you take all of that stuff as face value, that doesn't necessarily mean that's how it's going to be now. And that was when you're the head coach. Now you're working for someone. And I really am struggling to quite understand the people who are immediately. Every NFL analyst is mocking us. LOL. I mean, maybe. I mean, Tony, when was the last time every NFL person all at the same time did the same? I mean, like, I think there's a little bit of hyperbole and overreaction going on here. And once again, I'm going to say, like, this feels like something you should probably let play out a little bit, because if you want to know what hyperbolic overreaction looks like, go back to the tweet that I sent walking out of the stadium after the Michigan game and find the 75 people who wanted to kill themselves in my mentions about how Ohio State football is dead forever and why would they even bother continuing to play the season? And it's like, you know what? You look like a stupid idiot right now because you completely overreacted. Like, chill out. It's going to be okay. That would be my professional advice to you.
The NFL analysts, I'm just trying to think of all of them and how they could all be uniform right now when they all have different jobs, different networks, different hours. Couldn't possibly be talking about this. Plus, it's college football, so they're not talking about it anyway. And Billy Tuesday says it all comes down to trusting Ryan Day. Like, he's at this point, he has won a national championship, one of 5 Ohio State head coaches in history to do so. And this is his job. Like, he's not going to knowingly hire somebody that's going to make his job more difficult and make his program worse. Now, who, all the hot boards that were put out there, was Matt Patricia on any of them? I don't believe so, a month ago when all of this started breaking news. So, it is interesting that that's where he went. And that was not the only NFL name that was talked about. So I do think this was something where that's something that he was looking for. And one of the things I've heard about Matt Patricia is that sometimes his defenses are too complicated for their players, and that kind of annoyed them. Can't do that in college. And so this is also something that as Ryan Day and Matt Patricia are sitting down talking, like, when they're talking, what do you want? Like, what does Ryan Day want? That's the number one thing that he's going to get. Like, what does Ryan Day want from defense? That's why he went out and got Jeff Hafley. He wanted that defense. He wanted Jim Knowles. That's why he went out and got that. So what does he want from Matt Patricia? And then what can Matt Patricia do? What kind of new tricks can I'm not going to call him an old dog because he's not that much older than us. So a very young dog. What kind of new tricks can a very young dog in Matt Patricia do? And how malleable is he? How because I think this past year was not an easy one for everybody in terms of the push and the pull. You don't want to go back to that. So, like, Matt Patricia as the defensive coordinator, what is his defense? Where is the alignment? Ryan Day and head coaches always talk about you want staff alignment. So I'm going to assume that Tim Walton, Matt Guerrieri, Larry Johnson are all aligned here. I don't know what the alignment is, and I'd be fascinated to find out. And then let's hear what the recruits have to say as well, because I know a bunch of Mark Givler and a bunch of the other recruiting analysts in the Ohio State sphere are going to be reaching out to recruits and commits and like, so what do you think? And I think one of the interesting things is everybody knows the name Matt Patricia in the defensive sphere of things. And, it did not go well with the Lions, but there are going to be some Super Bowl rings on the recruiting trail and things like that, where he does have some cachet in that way. But yeah, I assume it's going to be okay, but I don't know if it's going to be a home run or if it's going to be, legging out a double.
Right. Well, and like, this is, I think, representative of a lot of the comments from Belisari. Every place he's ever been was worse with him than before and better once he left. He was with the New England Patriots from 2004 until 2017. And when he was their defensive coordinator, they won 2 Super Bowls and lost to the Super Bowl in his final season, and they've won 1 Super Bowl since then. And have the New England Patriots been better since he left? I would argue they have not, and that's just one of the places he's coached. So
I would also argue, Tom, that you could credit Matt Patricia for those Super Bowls and not Tom Brady.
You certainly could argue that, yes. They did Tom Brady get the stop on 4th and 1 against the Seahawks? No, he did not. I would argue you could credit Pete Carroll with that, but that's neither here nor there. I saw Glasswing Butterfly says, "Why do you think he's a good fit? Then convince us he'll be good." We're not here to convince you he'll be good. We're here to say, I don't know. We'll see. Mm-hmm. Like this is. We are not here to sell this to you. We are not here to tell you this is going to be amazing. We're not here to tell you this is going to be a disaster. No one knows how this is going to go. There's so many unknowns here. You have Matt Patricia, who has not coached in college in 20 years. You've got he does a lot of odd fronts, which is not something Ohio State has done a whole heck of a lot. You've got Tim Walton and Matt Guerrieri in new and presumably more influential roles on the back end of the defense. Like, there's a lot of this stuff. You've lost your entire starting defensive front. You lost Cody Simon. You lost Denzel Burke. You lost Jordan Hancock. You lost Lathan Ransom. Like, this is going to be an almost entirely new Ohio State defense next year. Here's one thing I will pretty much guarantee you. The Ohio State defense will not be as good in 2025 as it was in 2024. Mm-hmm. Is that a direct reflection on Matt Patricia? No, it's not a direct reflection on Matt Patricia or Tim Walton or Matt Guerrieri or anyone else. It's a reflection of the fact that they lost like 8 of their starters off of last year's team. Guess what? That might be the single best Ohio State defense you see in your lifetime. This was going to be a worse Ohio State defense in 2025 if they brought Jim Knowles back. That was a almost once in a lifetime alignment of talent and coaching and, a third year in the same system and all that kind of stuff. That is the perfect storm in a good way. You're not getting that every year. If you got that every year, you would just win the national championship every year. And teams don't do that. Like, Georgia has had those kind of defenses. Alabama has had those kind of defenses. But it's not, they have it every single year. Nick Saban didn't have those defenses every year. Kirby Smart has not had those defenses every year. It's just, this is going to be a step back season. There's lots of stuff I'm not ready to say. This is going to be a step back season. I am willing to say that. And that's especially true on the defensive side of the ball. And that's okay. They literally won a national championship 3 weeks ago. You might have to take a deep breath and just sort of enjoy that for a while. Like, savor the scent of the national championship trophy for a little while before you go running, screaming through the woods, tearing your hair out. Super chat from Mike Farino says, "This is the first hire that I truly have no idea what Day sees. Day 100% gets the benefit of the doubt, but I have no confidence in this decision."
Yeah, and I think that's fair. It's the last sentence there is true. It's like Day gets 100% of the benefit of the doubt, but I think it's okay to have some concern about the hire. I mean, fans should kind of have concerns about every hire until they see the results, because it's just the nature. But again, like, I don't know how many people were talking about Matt Patricia 3 weeks ago when this was happening. So in terms of like no idea what he sees, this is the defensive coordinator that won 2 Super Bowls and was defensive coordinator for Bill Belichick. So I think that's one of the things you see. Had top, and I don't know the numbers right offhand. Somebody posted it on our board, and I'll just try to steal it in my brain real quick. It was something like in his 7 years, he had a top 5, top 7 defense like every year, but 1 or 2 of those. So, there's some legitimacy to him. I mean, he did become an NFL head coach from being a coordinator. Not that, I mean, the NFL is so incestuous. Like, once you make it, you don't ever have to leave, kind of thing. And you'll just go from job to job. But I mean, he was an NFL head coach. That's a legitimate thing, and was a very successful defensive coordinator. If you're concerned about hiring failed head coaches, then can I remind everybody what Jim Knowles did at Cornell? It wasn't good. Mm-hmm. So like what you do as a defense coordinator and what you do as a head coach, I don't think are all that related.
Oh, for sure not. And I saw someone in the comments wondering why Bill Belichick didn't hire Matt Patricia as his kid. Bill Belichick went the Kirk Ferentz route with his defensive coordinator position, if I remember correctly. I believe it's Steve Belichick. You know, I don't know exactly how the Bill Belichick era in North Carolina is going to work, but I mean, certainly one of the ways the Bill Belichick era in North Carolina could work is that Bill Belichick coaches there for some period of time between 6 and 18 months, and then decides he's going to step down to go spend more time with his 25-year-old girlfriend. And then his son is the one who steps in at the point in the hiring cycle where you can't, it's not easy to replace someone. And then his son is the head coach. Listen, I have no idea how this could go. This could go anyway. This could go that way. It could be 8 months before that happens. I mean, it doesn't matter. The fact, I think the primary qualification for Steve Belichick is the last name Belichick. And, again, maybe that'll go great. I don't know. He was at Washington last year. It didn't go real great, but maybe it'll go great. We'll see. That's another one where, like, what is the degree of confidence that you have that you know exactly what's going to happen with the Bill Belichick era? Like, he could be fantastic and they could win a national championship, or he could be a complete disaster and be out of the job. His buyout drops on June 1st, if I recall correctly. June 1st of 2025, his buyout drops from $5 million to $1 million. Just put a pin in that. We'll see how that goes. Mike Ferguson says the Fire Ryan Day fans have emerged from their lair and seen their shadow. 6 more weeks of complaining. It is that time of year. Listen, it's what has he won a national championship 3 weeks and 2 days ago. Like, yes, what has he done for you lately? That's the question you need to be asking. And the answer is, well, he hired a defensive coordinator. So, I don't know. Again, like, we're not here to sell you on this. We're here to tell you, like, yeah, I don't know. It could work out. It might not work out. He might be here for 1 year. He might be here for 4 years. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. Yes. Ryan Dash Championship Beard says Belichick promised his son the DC job in North Carolina, and he delivered on that promise. Yeah, Brandon, we're going to so you're going to see references to his past, and it's like there's stuff from the 90s, and none of it was proven, and none of it was like taken to trial. None of it was any. So, like, what would you like us to do with that information? Because there's not any actionable information there. So,
right, something in 1996 did not end up going to trial. So, like, this was something that came out in like 2018, and the Lions weren't aware of it. But then, I'm not saying like their hands are tied. What are they supposed to do? But it's just like that's kind of the way the world that we exist in. Like, so they went ahead and moved on and hired him, and Ryan Day has done the same thing.
Right. Like, we are not in a position to vet any information from 30 years ago. So we're going to have to kind of sit this one out because it was vetted by people in charge and nothing came of it. So that's not really our position. Mike says, my confusion is promoting an OC from within with limited experience and not doing the same on the other side of the ball with so many new starters. Matt Guerrero knows the scheme and has experience. Just curious. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the head coach is on the offensive side of the ball. And so, it's no matter who is running the offense on Ohio State, they're running Ryan Day's offense. Chip Kelly was running, Ryan Day's offense with a twist of Chip Kelly on top. Like, Brian Hartline is going to be running Ryan Day's offense with a little bit of Brian Hartline on top. Like, you're running Ryan Day's offense. On the defensive side of the ball, Ryan Day has some thoughts, but Ryan Day is probably not like dictating specific elements of it because that's not his side of the ball.
Yeah, and if this was if Ryan Day was a defensive coach, then you might see something different where you'd be more willing to take a chance on somebody younger because you have that familiarity and you're there a lot. So I think this makes sense in the way that if you're going to hire somebody who is a little less experienced, and let's remember, this is going to be Brian Hartline's 3rd year as an OC or co-OC. So and he's been part of the offensive staff since 2018. So to call him like limited, that's not limited experience. He's been here almost as long as Ryan Day. So like he's been working and he's been in the meetings and he's been preparing. So at some point you if you just keep preparing, like, what are you preparing for? You're not preparing for anything if you never get the next job. And so you're not also like Ryan Day is not wasting time trying to prepare Brian Hartline to never promote him to the job. So like that's just a big waste of time if you never give the guy the opportunity to make the next step.
Yeah, and this is sort of related for Mike Farino. Saban regularly promoted DCs from within, almost always went outside for offensive coordinators, and that's same thing. Guess what? When you're coaching for Nick Saban, you're not teaching Nick Saban about defense. You're running the Nick Saban defense when you're coaching for Nick Saban, and you may have some input there. You may have some interesting twists and different things you can do there, but it's the same thing. You're not when you're coming to Ohio State. You're not coming in and lecturing Ryan Day on actually here's how to run an offense. Like Ryan Day's done just fine on offense. It's the exact same thing. I appreciate that, Mike, because it's spot on there. Uncle Rico
Well,
said,
real quick on the Saban thing, like he's made quite a few hires that were criticized as well. Like even bringing Sarkisian in as offensive coordinator was a little odd. But then even like Pete Golding was a non-internal hire, and that seems to be like the one that maybe didn't work out for them as the DC, even though he was there for like 4 years.
Yeah. Uncle Rico says there were plenty of Eagles players that sure hated Chip Kelly. Our superstar staff last season would have missed the playoffs any other year. And that's the thing. Like you can all the stuff about, and this is the fun part about having talked about this for a couple days now on our board is we've already watched people have these arguments and sort of sort through all of this stuff. And this is one of the things that got brought up. It was Chip Kelly was not a very universally popular player as an NFL head coach by any means, and was extremely successful as an Ohio State offensive coordinator, and was you saw him on the recruiting trail as an effective guy out there. So yeah, that doesn't necessarily tell me anything there. And then the staff last year, they won the national championship last year. In previous years, they would have missed the playoffs, and it would have been a very disappointing season. So now that doesn't necessarily impact anything one way or the other, but that's it's absolutely true. Super chat from Deceased says this was an elite DC. This man was an elite DC for New England. His stint with the Lions was a stain on him, but not everyone is meant to be a head coach. I like the hire. Yeah, and if you like the hire, that's fine. If you're not sold on the hire, that's fine. Like I think the only thing that I look at and go, I'm not sure where this is coming from is the hard and fast, write this in stone. This is going to be a disaster. Like, I don't know. It could be, maybe, could be a success. It could be an enormous success. It could go badly. Like, what are you basing that on? Are you basing this on, well, he had a bad stint as a head coach between 5 and 7 years ago in the NFL? Okay, like, can I tell you how Nick Saban's stint as a head coach went in the NFL? I mean, that's what does that have to do with the price of tea in China, Tony, as they say? That doesn't necessarily mean that has anything to do with what's going on in a different position, in a different organization, working under a different head coach, working, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be a disaster. Could it go badly? Sure. Of course it could. Absolutely. Like I saw someone say, certainly you must have an opinion on this. Like, no, my opinion is, I don't know. I guess we'll see how it plays out. I'm very interested to talk to Ross Fulton at some point this week about, his thoughts on the odd front and how that might work with personnel. I don't know that there's going to be like, everyone who's sure this is going to be a disaster, tell me exactly what the mix of 4 down versus odd front that they're going to run this year. Like they don't necessarily have the personnel to run an odd front. Maybe they will 50% of the time. Maybe they will 80% of the time. Maybe they will 20% of the time. Like, how is this going to go? I don't know. There's a bunch of variables that I don't know, and you don't know either.
And if it is an odd front, does that mean Edric Houston is back to a defensive end rather than playing defensive tackle? And how does he do? And what does this mean about Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson and getting those guys snaps? Like there's so much involved in this to know exactly how it's going to go is complete guess. And to claim that is wrong.
Ryan Dawes says, another strange round of complaining for fans. At least he did not hire a special teams coordinator. Listen, I think we can all agree there. No, they won a national championship 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks and 2 days ago, they won a national championship. Like, I think at this point the guy has, Ryan Day has earned the benefit of the doubt from Ohio State fans, but I mean, maybe not.
I'm just glad that the honeymoon is now over. Like, get that thing out of the way, get this marriage started, and get the complaining going. And again, it's a huge position. So like, I completely understand the two main coordinators that you've now hired is a guy who's never called plays in Brian Hartline, and Matt Patricia, who has called plays, but it's been a while and hasn't been part of the college game in a long time. So these are two, I wouldn't call them home runs because you don't know. Like you assume like Ryan Day knows what pitch is coming and he's taking the swing. Now let's see where exactly the ball goes with both of these guys. And I completely get the concern, but the idea that, you think what's going to happen without letting any of it play out, it's not accurate. So in the interest of accuracy, I'm going to wait to see what happens before I tell you whether this was bad or good, because right now we don't know.
Yeah. And Mike Smith says, I'm not saying it's a bad hire, just curious about how a guy who uses different terminology and scheme fits in with a mostly new roster. Same with the recruiting angle. Seems a little random, I guess. They may keep a lot of the defensive terminology the same. When Chip Kelly came in, they kept the offensive terminology the same, and Chip Kelly learned the offensive terminology. They may try and keep the terminology the same. Matt Guerrieri has coached with Jim Knowles for what? He coached with him at Duke. He coached with him, I think, a little bit at Oklahoma State. He was, was with him at a number of stops. He knows the Jim Knowles defense better than probably just about anyone else. So you could absolutely keep all the terminology the same and have, if it's all internal with one new guy, you might make the one new guy learn the terminology, and you're going to tweak your scheme, sure, but they ran a bunch of different stuff last year, and so you might run a different mix of the stuff, but it's not necessarily entirely brand new stuff. You're not switching to constant 100% bear front. Like, no, that's not what they're going to do. They're not going to run 100% 3 down this year, probably. What are they going to do? We don't know yet. That's why this is one of these reasons why you might want to just sort of pump the brakes. I know everyone has to have a super strong opinion day one on all of this stuff. Either this is going to be the greatest hire in the world, or this is going to be a flaming plane wreck. It's okay to say, like, yeah, man, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. There's a lot of variables in here that we sort of have to see how they develop. And I think that's the world might be a better, and Tony, dare I say, smarter place if people took that approach to more things rather than just sort of immediately stomping their feet and saying, this is going to be this, definitely plant my flag here and I'll never be wrong.
Well, Tom, I can assure you that even with facts, I can still manipulate the stats to the way I want them to read after a season and tell you whether or not this is a good or a bad hire. But in terms of a guy who uses different terminology, he's been a coach forever. Like, he can learn new terminology. You're not asking a bunch of 18 and 19, 20-year-olds to learn something for one guy. Like, no, it's on that guy to learn everything. He's a professional. He's got time to do it. He doesn't have to go to school. He doesn't have to, worry about his girlfriend. Like, he could just be a coordinator and learn the defense and get it going.
Lane says, guess the question is, why make a hire that which you have think has the possibility of failing? Which hire in the history of football has had no possibility of failing is, I think, my question for you. Like, what, Jeff, you brought up Jeff Hafley. Jeff Hafley coming in 2019 came in, and it was like, well, he hasn't really been a college guy much. So the recruiting piece, who knows? And he's running a very different defense from what they've run. Boy, this might be a disaster. And it was great. Now, how much of that had to do with Chase Young and Jeff Okudah and Jordan Fuller and the rest of those guys in that defense? Probably at least some, but it worked out better. And then Kerry Combs came in, and it was like, well, I don't know. It might be good. It might be bad. And it went very poorly. And then Jim Knowles came in, and it was like, well, this is going to be different, but it might go well. It might go poorly. And it went great. And you go through Urban Meyer's hires. Like, Urban Meyer hired some real clunkers at Ohio State. When Tom Herman left to take the Houston job after the 2014 season, do you think Urban Meyer thought, well, I'm going to bring in Ed Warner and Tim Beck, and there's absolutely no chance this is going to go poorly? Like, you were there. If you remember 2015, it went poorly, and 2016 went poorly. Like, there are no guaranteed home run hires. If there were, they would all be making like $15 million a year, because that just everyone would be trying to hire them. And with as important as these hires are, if you had a guaranteed success, you would be making millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. Is this guaranteed success? No. Is this a guaranteed failure? No. It's just like, and I saw one of the people who's like the most threatening to jump off the roof in the comments saying that we don't know what we're talking about because his last job was in the NFL as a defensive coordinator. His last job in the NFL was as an offensive line coach with the Eagles in 2023. Maybe chill out. Maybe.
Well, and I saw somebody else saying the Eagles were terrible in 2023, and it's like he was like an assistant. So it'd be like blaming Ohio State for something Mike Soleni did, or Brett Zadebski, and these are like GAs, guys that you don't necessarily hear about. But in terms of the question from Lane, why make a hire which you think has a possibility of failing? I guarantee you, Ryan Day thinks this has a much higher probability of being a success than being a failure. But as Tom said, like no hire is guaranteed, and I'm always willing to give the benefit of the doubt to let's see how it goes. I think the only time I've been like, no, this is a terrible hire is Kansas hiring Charlie Weiss, where you knew like this was not going to go well, or Florida hiring Charlie Weiss, or anybody hiring Charlie Weiss.
Kansas hiring Les Miles. There are some common threads here.
So like there's a handful out there. This is one that's certainly like, oh well, let's see how it goes, because I'm not sure. I'm definitely not sure about this one, but I'm also like, I'm not sure it's not going to work.
Yeah, and Lane says, think there's a Wink Martindale parallel here, and that was ugly for a large part of last season. Yeah, I mean, possibly. It's a guy coming with an NFL background, and Wink Martindale's defense was probably a little bit overly complicated for the college level. And Wink Martindale also ran into some of the same issues that Ohio State's likely going to run into this year, which is a whole bunch of their talented defensive players left, and then some of the other guys were hurt last year. And so, yeah, is there a possibility that goes poorly? Yeah, absolutely. 100% that there's a possibility you run into some of those same issues. Now, that's one of the benefits of potentially having a Tim Walton on staff, having a Matt Guerrieri on staff. I mean, these guys are guys who can say like, hey, listen, we have gone through multiple seasons with, in most of these cases, like these exact guys. You kind of know this is what is a realistic amount of install during spring. This is what is a realistic amount of install during fall camp. This is what is a realistic amount of install once the season gets rolling. You're not necessarily going to be able to do as much as you can in the NFL, because these are guys who, they're going to class. There are rules in terms of how much you can actually do in terms of, time in the, time on the practice field and all that kind of stuff. There are NCAA rules governing all of that stuff. So you can't necessarily run something that's as complicated as you can in the NFL, which I'm sure if I know that, I'm quite confident that Matt Patricia knows that. And a bunch of the whole rest of the defensive coaching staff is all returning. It's one new guy. So if Larry Johnson, I'm sure has a very, very good sense after doing this for 30 years of what you can do and what you can install and all that kind of stuff and what guys can handle. James Laurinaitis has gone through this as a player and as a coach. Tim Walton has gone through this as a player and as a coach. Matt Guerrieri has coached at the college level for, his whole career. This is not going to be like, he comes in and he just insists that we're going to do it this way. And, this is not Stalin. Like you have, the other guys get some say in this whole thing, because that every time we talk to coaches about, how does this work? How does how'd you come up with this play? What do the coaches say every time, Tony?
Well, we worked on it in practice. We worked on it and we talked about it and throughout the week, and we just all came together and decided when and where, and that's kind of how the play calling goes. And it's decided before the game ever gets there, situations and circumstances. And I mean, in terms of Wink Martindale, Michigan had the number 10 total defense last year with very little offense. So. Mm-hmm. Like if Ohio State has a number 10 defense in 2025, be absolutely thrilled with that, because that's a kind of step back that you can still win plenty of games with.
Mm-hmm. Ty says there's literally an article suggesting Brian Hartline wasn't going to be a good coach after Zach Smith left. Boy, I remember a lot of takes during that whole period. Not saying Patricia's going to be a slam dunk, but let's pump the brakes a bit and give him a chance. This is really all we're saying here. Jordan in here asking the real questions, the tough questions. No one has asked the most important question: how much McDonald's coffee does he drink? Did you see the Jim Knowles special press conference at Penn State where he had water in front of him and it was like, is there not McDonald's coffee in Penn State? And someone sent me a tweet that like the McDonald's in State College had closed. And it's like, oh man, I don't know if Jim Knowles knew that before he agreed to this. That's you got $3 million and maybe you can have it like flown in or something. I don't know. But boy, that's going to be while Matt Patricia is adjusting to life in the college game, Jim Knowles adjusting to life without McDonald's coffee 18 hours a day is going to be, we'll see how that one goes.
I wonder if Patricia has to adjust from Duncan to McDonald's.
Ooh,
or if
man.
he has to swing through Duncan closer to home before he gets to campus, because there isn't one near the Woody there. So, Tom, I've got to run. Are you going to stay on? Are we going to run?
I think we're kind of. I'm just kind of scrolling through the questions here. I think we've kind of answered most of the stuff. So, okay. No, it's Tony, a hire that has inspired reactions. That's the most exciting and notable piece of this whole story.
And Jeff Johnson asks the last one here: can we assume this means Larry Johnson has made a decision as to retirement or not? I don't we have heard nothing about Larry Johnson possibly moving on for the first time in like 5 years. So
yeah,
it sounds like he's back. But as I say this, as soon as we upload this video entirely, it'll be like something new will come out. But no, I don't think that means that, and it doesn't necessarily not mean that, but we'll find out. So if you guys could hit the thumbs up if you're watching live, we would appreciate that. Hit the bell to be notified. Subscribe to the channel if you've not yet done so, and go ahead and continue to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Sign up now. First month just $4.99, where we're talking about this and everything else. Spring ball is about 5 weeks away, and we'll be covering all of that and the lead up to it as well. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.